All right. I think maybe it's time now, so we can get started. So, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for coming to this presentation of mine. Learner Autonomy, a Castle on Conceptual Sand here. My name is Thomas Stringer, and I'll first start by just saying thank you for coming to this remote session. And yeah, it's a little bit about me to begin with. I've been involved in English language teaching here in Japan for about 15 years, and I'm currently employed as an instructor of English as a foreign language at Kwansei Gakuin University in Hyogo. I'm also a doctoral student at the University of St Andrews in the UK. I'm a fellow of the Higher Education Academy in the UK, and I'm broadly interested in learner and teacher development with a particular focus on autonomy. And I also operate the Language Learner Autonomy research portal that you can check out at the QR code that you can see in the corner of every slide anytime. So it's a work in progress. It's a developmental project of mine. But if you're interested in this topic, feel free to check it out. And I'd love to get some feedback from you. As for today, what I'm going to be talking about is just a little bit of an overview first of the presentation, and then I'll give some background to the topic, look at some different theoretical models of language learner autonomy, a new conceptual framework, and then look at some different implications for research and practice. And then hopefully there'll be some time for question and answers left at the end. Okay. So, as I said, just to begin with, I'll start with a brief overview of what today is going to be about. So the main purpose of the presentation is to identify some of these inconsistencies in the literature surrounding autonomy, and then look at a new way of conceptualizing the construct. And so we'll be looking at some different aspects of the literature as well to kind of get that underway. And the findings of the presentation are, that we need to avoid reductionist conceptual or theoretical models that can, for understanding autonomy, and instead look towards complex dynamic systems theory, okay, and an understanding of language learner autonomy as an epiphenomenon, okay? And this suggests that we need a broad reorientation in terms of research and practice on the topic. So let me just get started. So a little background to the history of the construct of language learner autonomy first. It has a very, very long history. It's, of course, been a topic of interest in language learning and teaching for around 40 years. And it's kind of achieved signature status, the key aspect of language education now. That focus on personalization and individualization, which is so characteristic of autonomy, is really a kind of reaction to broader educational trends that we saw in the 20th century towards standardization, systemization, formalization of education as the kind of nation states started to compete with one another. And it's a kind of counter reaction to that. Now, part of the impact of this long history is that, the concept has become so diverse and it's been applied in so many different situations and cases that it's become somewhat kind of diffuse and hard to pin down exactly what it is. And, that can have ripple effects onwards, both into research that makes it hard to research, to measure, or even to decide if measurement is necessary, and also into practice, into teaching as well. So it might be hard for teachers to know whether autonomy should be something they prioritize, and if so, how should they do it. So the long history, the classic definition of autonomy is, of course, that it's this capacity, right, to or ability to go after what one wants in a learning situation. And it's come to have these different characteristics over this long history. So different domains of the concept have been identified, psychological ones like affect or belief, strategic ones to do with, for example, setting goals, planning and monitoring evaluation, and of course behavioral aspects of the concept as well. So particularly of interest is language learning development, okay, and whether that's something that we can use as a proxy for understanding learner autonomy as well. A lot of the concept has Vygotskian roots. It's to do with the accretion of contextualized learning over time, and other developments have come via, parallels with other theories, such as self-determination theory, okay, which has a similar, but not exactly the same idea of what language learner autonomy is. But many of the different conceptualizations have this idea of the supportive environment is essential. Environment, of course, meaning not just the physical environment, but the people that are around the learner as well. Right? A recent scoping review of, I think, over 60, maybe 65 papers found that most research into the concept has been too brief, too short term. It doesn't really dive deep enough into learners' journeys or really cover their life beyond the classroom. And in fact, it's very centered on the classroom. A lot of research is also not experimental, as in it's not evaluating a particular autonomy promoting tool. And too often the research that is out there is just measuring perception changes about learners' self-perception of how autonomous they are. And there's a lot of similarity in the research that's out there in terms of the questionnaires, in types of interview, or the scales that are used. And yet there's also this vast kind of profusion of different conceptual bases that make it hard, I think, for practitioners and even researchers to get a clear idea of what it is that they're researching or what it is that they're teaching about, if they choose to teach about it in the classroom. So there are some different models or ways that it's been operationalized in the classroom, as some put more focus on communication in the target language. A lot of them focus on personalized learning, so that's learning through exploration, personalized inquiry and reflection. Other concepts of it focus on curriculum developments and a kind of iterative curriculum. Authenticity is another kind of key model that's out there to describe language learner autonomy. Authenticity in this case meaning the real world relevance, real world applicability of learning. And other models of language learner autonomy have focused on learning beyond the classroom. Okay, so recognizing that as actually a primary driver of autonomy. Now, if we look at these in total, in sum, I often like to see these as representing something of an onion. Of course, this is a visual metaphor, but autonomy is a multidimensional phenomenon. But too often, I think these phenomena have been kind of analyzed and picked apart as if they were just layered, like an onion, layers of an onion that don't really, they go on top of each other, but they don't really perturb, right, or impact each other too much, even if they depend on each other for their form, their shape. So, for example, we've got these core psychological aspects and the technical aspects, right? And then going beyond those kind of regulatory subsystems, and they're moving beyond that to the situational or the environmental ones. And even then onwards and outwards to kind of those individual learning behaviors and measuring the learning outcomes, right? So instead, I think a kind of more, coherent theoretical framework for understanding learner autonomy is the complex dynamic system. Now, this has some various qualities that need to be covered first. One is that the complex system is relational. That means the different elements of a system stand in multiple networked relations to one another. The next aspect is that it's non-linear. That means that the kind of future development or the historical development of a system can't easily be regressed to individual factors. The next feature of these systems is that it's autocatalytic, meaning it's kind of spontaneously self-starting, right? It's self-organizing, right? And so another feature of these is the context dependency. So the initial conditions of a complex system, both highly determine its form, and a complex system will adapt to and adapt its environment. There are other features too. Another important one to understand is that of attractor states. So these are kind of natural energetic equilibria within a system, kind of steady state conditions. But of course they are temporary because these systems are open. They continually develop. They are iterative. In other words, they are never at rest. And because the interconnectedness of a complex system is what it is, it means that there's endless feedback coming in, which kind of amplifies or deadens those changes that occur inside the system. Now, the final and most important feature of the complex system is that of emergence. So this means new and unpredictable behaviors that kind of exceed the sum of the parts. They're more than the sum of the parts, right? And this last one, this emergence, is key, I think. So can we think about language learner autonomy as one of these epiphenomena or emergent systems? There are kind of encouraging signs from the world of artificial intelligence in terms of the Hopfield network, for example, which is a way of modeling a dynamic computer network or a neural network where you have these transitional relationships between networked nodes that are moving between kind of temporary and final states. And these final states are kind of like the steady state conditions, right? The attractor states, right? And they represent the memory of a system, right? So, of course, this kind of static diagram that you can see on the screen could only ever capture a snapshot of such a system, but it possibly suggests one way to reconceive autonomy. So we've got lots of these little multiplexed networked hubs, from the previous conceptual models that we've discussed earlier in the presentation. And then there are these transitional shifts where different nodes within the network connect to one another, right? And then there will be steady attractor states within the system, and there are others which are awaiting linkage, so they exist in potentia, as it were. Okay, so under such a system, autonomy would emerge under conducive network conditions. So that means, those alignment of the technical, psychological, behavioral domains that have been identified in earlier models, and the visible and invisible contextual states and those interrelations which spread out beyond those kind of key nodes. Of course, you wouldn't be able to reduce autonomy to any individual unit for analysis because of the interconnectedness of the system, and of course because autonomy would be understood as an epiphenomenon. That is, it's emerging as a result of the system. It's not reducible to the parts of the system. Yeah. So how would that look? Well, it would exist within a stakeholder-centered environment, right? Often in versions of language learner autonomy, we talk about learner-centeredness, but we need to understand beyond just the learner and think more about broader stakeholders. I mean, parents, teachers, school administrators, policymakers. It's lengthy. These changes will happen these emergencies will happen over long learning journeys, right? In multiple different contexts, running on concurrent timelines, right? That are sometimes seemingly disparate from the outside. There will be tipping points where there is, nothing. Apparently, no language learner autonomy has emerged, and then, seemingly suddenly, it will be there. The system is also self-enhancing, meaning that once it's running, it will feed back into itself. Okay, It's idiosyncratic, in other words, it's sensitive to the initial conditions. It's transitory in that the steady state autonomy is not possible, right? It's contingent on that alignment in the broader network. It's adaptive and adapting, and again, it's irreducible to any of the individual behavioral, psychological, conceptual subdomains that we talked about earlier in the presentation, right? So, what does this mean for us? This, if we accept the idea of autonomy as an emergent phenomena or an epiphenomena, what could that mean? Well, it has some philosophical implications for us. It'll require us to kind of fundamentally transform the way that we understand the learning environment and our role in it. It implies the need for mutual trust and respect, and also distributed control over learning. So it can't just be centered in one place like a teacher, for example, or even just in a learner. It requires a orientation towards uncertainty, which is, sometimes perhaps unwelcome in education, but it needs an orientation towards non-linearity, randomness, right? And also it means that you need to reach out to people. You need to kind of negotiate learning with these different stakeholders. Further philosophical implications of this are related to kind of how we see knowledge generation within research. So, for example, generalizability that may have to go out of the window, considering how localized each complex system would be. These cooperation between different bodies really suggests the need for academics, or indeed other people from different disciplines, to work together to bring different perspectives on the topic. And localized understandings will be crucial. In other words, what it means to be autonomous will preclude a kind of traditional quantitative analysis that tries to reason outwards, right, to the general. And again, stakeholder-centeredness rather than just learner-centeredness, as I mentioned before, right? So, as for research, what will that mean? What are the implications for research? So, it will mean that teaching practitioners, if they want to investigate their own context, they're going to need to be involved in action research methodologies. Action research is particularly well suited, I think, to investigating autonomy from a complexity perspective. It's quite adaptable and accepting as a research methodology. It welcomes feedback and feed forward, and it integrates reflective processes, and it's interested in the local case, right? Generalizability, replicability, those kind of research orientations will be incompatible. And also participatory forms of action research, exploratory forms of action research will be necessary. They'll be required to build the kind of consensus, right, around that we discussed earlier. As for teaching itself, it implies that we need to kind of lean into the unpredictable situations. Perhaps teachers are very familiar already with the idea of unpredictability, of straddling the boundary between organization and disorder. It means acceptance of non-linearity, means implying a kind of rejection of a simplistic success narrative. It also means educators need to be conscious about extending the hand, not just to learners, but other to relevant stakeholders as well. And it also means that we need to be exploratory as teachers. That means being patient. It means taking time, developing initial kind of exploratory questions, adapting, iterating, and then reflecting on what we know about the learning situation, and then iterating again. So in terms of recommendations, for a teacher, it would be to familiarize yourself deeply with not only your students but any other relevant stakeholders in your context, and to combine whatever different research methodological tools that you're familiar with, be they quantitative or qualitative, and triangulate them to your best ability to understand your context. That understanding your own context means focusing on the local evidence, the local context. That's what's crucial. That's what we need to move the research field forward, and also to ingrain this habit of consistent reflection, both among yourself and among other stakeholders in your context. Right. So that's my talk for today. I hope that was useful for you or interesting. I think we've got about 5 minutes left. So if there were any questions from the room, I'd be happy to take them now. Dominic. Yep, Dominic, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry, I'm in the conference, so I don't know if I can turn my camera on.
That's fine.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can hear you fine.
Yeah, thank you very much for the interesting talk. So you were talking about your stakeholders, but at the same time you were saying that you didn't like this model of the onion, but you were describing different distance, like a constellation of stakeholders, where there's a definite distance between the individual student and that particular stakeholder. So there's obviously the closest distance might be the parent or teacher, and then you've got going up to institutional kind of stakeholders. Given that complex dynamic systems theory, you're talking about the strength of the connection between individuals in the system. Isn't that just a different type of onion model?
Okay, well, first, Dominic, thank you very much for your question. The onion model that I talked about earlier is really my conceptualization of how language learner autonomy has been presented in the past. And really, I find a lot of the earlier models don't fully account for the complexity or depth of those interrelations that you're talking about, and the degree to which they impinge on one another, and how a learner can stand in internal relations to themselves for different aspects of their psychology, and then in addition to other learners in the environment, and then moving out to other stakeholders. So yes, it's the same. The complex dynamic systems theory model is the same as the onion model in that it acknowledges the existence of these different kind of multiplexed relationships. But what it aims to do, I would say that is different, is to present an understanding of this as a kind of fully kind of influx or interdependent system that a holistic perspective is required to truly understand it, and you can't reduce the understanding to any single relationship, either between one learner and another learner, or between a learner and a parent. And for example, did I answer your question?
Yes, I think my feeling is like so the Douglas Fir group wrote a paper about using Bronfenbrenner. So this is kind of maybe the deluxe onion model, and I just wonder if it's really your viewpoint is based on the research you've read, because obviously it's convenient for the researcher to only look at one layer of the onion, right? It's quite difficult to look at multiple layers of the onion at the same time. So I don't know. I wondered if I think you've answered my question. Thank you.
Yes,
I don't.
I think we're out of time. It's 20 past
Yeah.
now, so I have to
Thank you.
wrap things up. But yes, I would say it's very, very difficult to look at every layer of the onion, which is why part of the model is the length of time that's required, right, to develop these longer perspectives so that, you know, matters can be looked at from different angles. But yes, thank you, Dominic, for those questions. And thank you, everybody else, for coming. And yeah, I hope you enjoy the rest of the conference. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks.